this update so crazy, I don't even want to record an intro. Not only did we get changes in Modern, we got changes in Legacy, and the Pauper format is completely different. It is just a whole new world out there. And my thoughts are going to be all here in this video. They are going to be timestamped as well. Pauper, I'm going to leave to the end. We're first going to touch base on Modern. We're going to do a little bit of Legacy as well. Again, remembering that I've only entered that format in the last like couple of months, 4 or 5 months. Not going to act like an expert on it, but regardless, the banned and restricted announcement, March 31st, 2025, planned and scheduled BNR announcements. What do we think about them? Comment section down below. How are we feeling about them right now? Because the Modern format having one change, only one change, is a bit of a problem to me. I feel like there should be more. I feel like we've only tackled the combo situation. Energy is still a problem. Why have we not done something about maybe the Dimir decks? But I guess those are fine too. Something needs to go in energy, right? Like, am I tripping? Like, why are we still working with... Oh my God. Power Creep Soul Sisters. Why are we still allowing that in the format? Whatever. I guess Modern Horizons 3 still needs to sell packs. No changes in Standard, which a lot of people have been talking about. No changes in Pioneer. I swear the last time I looked at a Pioneer metagame page, 50% of the metagame was 2 decks. I swear Pioneer was just 2 decks. Ain't nobody care about the Pioneer format no more. Stop playing that format. Nobody. There's no RCQ season for Pioneer this year. Nobody needs to be playing Pioneer. That's what they're saying. Legacy has Sowing Mycospawn and Troll of Khazad-dûm banned. So it looks like Sowing Mycospawn is banned, which means the blue decks are back. Maybe we will talk about that in a second. Vintage, no changes. Crazy. Alchemy, Explorer, Historic Times, blah, 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 blah. Pauper. Oh my God. 5. Count them, 5 changes. Prophetic Prisim unbanned, High Tide unbanned. They've talked about High Tide for a little bit. Prophetic Prisim is interesting. Recently, we did a React video talking about a database approach to unbannings and bannings in Pauper, and that creator was actually talking about Prophetic Prisim potentially coming back. So, oh my Lord. Okay, this one, okay. So, Basking Broodscale banned. Okay, cool. So the Broodscale combo are no longer legal in Pauper. We took out the best deck in the format. Now, here's the thing. We then banned Kuldotha Rebirth. Okay, not bad. I think there's some people that are aggressive. There's someone in the Mill Discord that wasn't a fan of this. I don't think this is that bad because I originally read this as like the mid-range piece, like the artifact that enters the battlefield and you exile the top card of your library, and then you can like pay 3, exile it, and like create a 2/2 knight with vigilance and everything. I thought it was that card, which was wild. No, it's Kuldotha Rebirth. So you sacrifice an artifact and you create 3/1/1 goblins. So this probably means the go wide creature based strategy in red that has evolved over time is officially gone. We're not going to be playing with Goblin Bushwhacker, and it probably dissuades a little bit of the artifact shenanigans, but I think Galvanic Blast is still perfectly fine and easy enough to enable. So it just means the go wide burn is gone, but the spell based burn that plays the creatures that like tap untap, like based on like if you like cast a spell or like they just deal damage every time you cast a spell. I think those decks like are still perfectly fine. They don't need to be super fast. They tend to be explosive, but now that you don't have a Basking Broodscale combo deck to beat, I think it's fine. And we still have the Writhing Chrysalis, which means you still have the Jund Wildfire's mid-range strategy. So it's like the colors are there, but maybe we don't have that because we banned Deadly Dispute. Oh my God, it happened. It happened. For those of you that don't understand, Deadly Dispute is fundamentally one of the pillar cards of the Pauper format. Fundamentally one of the pillars of the Pauper format. Deadly Dispute. Yes, I've talked about this in previous videos as well, but there are analogous versions of this card. Deadly Dispute. There's a Deadly Dispute where you sacrifice only a creature. There's a Deadly Dispute where you sacrifice an artifact or a creature. But again, both of those versions don't give you a treasure token. There's a Deadly Dispute, artifact creature, cool, you get a map token. Artifact creature, it has flashback. Artifact creature, like again, like there's other versions of it. Artifact creature and you gain life equal to the converted mana cost of the thing you sacrificed. Deadly Dispute is the only one that is miles better than those because you get a treasure token. The treasure token not only technically discounts the Deadly Dispute by 1, so it's a 1 mana functionally draw 2 or really draw 3 based on what you're sacrificing, but it also fixes your mana and gives you an artifact back. So not only is it helping affinity, it's giving you mana fixing. So think about the Jund Wildfire decks that are playing 3 colors. You just focus on black, you play Deadly Dispute, you get your mana back. This also makes the newest Packdoll Tron deck a lot worse, but we unbanned Prophetic Prisim, so maybe the Packdoll Tron deck is actually perfectly fine because Tron will be looking to use Prophetic Prisim. Regardless though, Deadly Dispute is the backbone of black. It is the backbone of black-based strategies in the Pauper format. Mid-range is going to take a big hit. Yes, there are analogs. I think Affinity will largely be fine. Affinity will definitely take a bit of a hit, but mid-range decks, I think just not having access to the treasure token will matter. Maybe it just means a bit of some tuning in the mana bases. There are still other options that are perfectly fine. I think the flashback version of Deadly Dispute was seeing play in terms of copies like 5 through 8 of Deadly Dispute. But as you can tell, I have so much to say on Pauper. Let's just focus on the modern format first. Let's just go to modern. Again, timestamps down below. Let's take the start here. So my name is Carmen, and I'm a senior game designer on Magic's play design team. Welcome to the first banned and restricted announcement of 2025, the last update to the BNR list. So a ton of changes to the landscape of non-rotating Magic formats. Let me put it down here for my camera. And is the next step in keeping those formats fun. Between around a modern, the modern RC, broad shifts within the legacy metagame, and Pauper's narrowing metagame, there's a lot to sink our teeth into. As usual, tomorrow we'll be doing a kind of weekly MTG, so look out for that. I'll be doing kind of react to that. Jumping into this particular discussion. So far, I haven't read the whole article, but no changes to banned scheduled BNRs. Okay, modern. To echo a point from the opening article, December's update to the modern ban list did a lot to breathe new life into the format. We've seen Mox Opal, Green Sun Zenith, and Faithless Looting show up in a bunch of decks to varying degrees of satisfaction from the team here at Wizards. Green Sun Zenith showing up in Yawgmoth and Amulet Titan combo decks was something we anticipated and we're happy with. Faithless Looting breathing new life into proactive graveyard-centered decks like Hollow One is also great. However, Mox Opal teaming up with Underworld Breach to create an explosive and resilient combo deck is not something we are happy with. And I'm happy they actually chose not to ban Mox Opal. I think a lot of people are very upset with Mox Opal. I think maybe there's a time down the line where Mox Opal can get banned, but the only top tier deck where Mox Opal is super played is a combo deck. The other Mox Opal decks aren't that great, so I don't think this will be a problem. I don't think it will be. Now, this is Grinding Station. To give a bit more context, the last couple of months have been a ton of experimentation with different ways to play new tools in a format, but over time, it's become increasingly apparent that the strongest thing to do in Modern is play Temur Grinding Breach combo deck. The deck used, now to be fair, Mill, give a shout out to Demir Mill, having a fantastic matchup against this deck. Underworld Breach and Grinding Station in conjunction with 0 mana artifacts to mill its library 3 cards at a time. Before winning a card like Thassa's Oracle or Grape Shot, the deck is notoriously resistant to graveyard and artifact hate by virtue of its ability to diversify its threats, which made it uniquely difficult to overcome in sideboarding. Between that resiliency and explosiveness, being able to win as early as the first turn. To be fair, the first turn wasn't that possible. It actually had a semi-consistent, like, turn 2, well, I shouldn't say consistent, like, it was, the turn 2 win was actually possible a really high percentage of the time. I think the turn 1 win, I believe required, like, I think if I remember from the Profs video, it required like at least like 3 Mox Opals in your opening hand. Like, it had to be like insane. But turn 3 wins were like pretty consistent. So banning that. Now, with the amount of pressure the Underworld Breach put on the format, and especially because Underworld Breach is just banned in other formats, and it's a game changer in the Commander format, I think we could all see that, like, okay, let's just get out of here. Banned in Pioneer, banned in Legacy, game changer in Commander. Let's just get out of the Modern format. We expect the format to change a good bit with its departure, especially sideboards. Previously, we saw players committing well over half of their sideboard to try and suppress the combo, but now we're optimistic that the format can open up a little bit, allowing for a wider range of strategies to exist. Looking past Temur Grinding Breach, Mono looks pretty good. Now, a bunch of different decks are showing up, including Orzhov Blink, making its way into the aforementioned Blink decks, with Ketramos, Marauding Mako making its way into Hollow One decks, Stock Up showing up in some blue decks. I'm not sure if Stock Up is quite a modern card just yet. We're planning on keeping an eye on the decks that are strong enough. You know, Boros Energy decks and Dimir Oculus decks. I'm so happy. Okay, good. They directly address these, as well as Eldrazi variants and Amulet Titan and the Orzhov Blink decks. We're watching Red-White Energy variants with closest to see if it's reasonable counterplay emerges. Excited to see what players cook up. Now, again, Energy, I think still is a little problematic. I think just like the package in general can be really overwhelming. It's not Ocelot Pride. It is the goddamn 1 mana 1/2 that gives you energy. It is the power crept Soul Sisters that is the problem. It's not anything else in the deck. That part of the combo package, the energy package is the problem. Now Legacy. Now we'll kind of go into this a little bit more. I'm wondering if the article addresses it directly, but we'll see. So Sowing Mycospawn, I kind of alluded to the fact that it specifically opens up blue strategies in the Legacy format, but we'll go over that in a second. So by numbers, the Legacy today does a good job of emulating a balanced format. The most played deck, Dimir Reanimator, isn't taking too large a piece of the pie, and the next handful of decks consistently showing up aren't doing so at clips that are wildly out of bounds. The issue is that despite having several decks, the format's slower macro archetypes like midrange and control have been largely pushed out. So you have a variety of broken decks that are vying for the top. And the problem is that most of these decks tend to just have a mid-range strategy plus an I win button. So like a 2-card combo or singular card that shuts off everything, or just an overwhelming combo that does so well that it's so hard to just even attack in the game one, let alone post board. So the way you want to think about this is, for example, you have the Eldrazi decks. Now the Eldrazi decks, which I'm hoping to go over in a second, stop the blue decks. Because they rely so heavily on their mana, you have the mono red deck, the mono red mid-range deck that just plays a bunch of moon effects and plays the One Ring and is able to stop the Eldrazi decks. Now the problem is, both of these decks tend to be stopped by the aforementioned kind of busted turn 1 deck. So the Oops All Spells deck that really like actively consistently can win on turn 1 is so hard to combat because the blue decks aren't around to stop that. Like the Force of Will Days decks can stop those decks like really well, especially post board with the amount of interaction that they play. But those decks are being held back by Sowing Mycospawn, the Eldrazi deck. So these decks are now able to run away with things, but now in post board, they tend to go into one of like 4 plans. Some decks will just kind of fortify on their primary plan. Some decks will go into like a mid-range black base strategy where they just play like good mid-range black pieces. Like they literally sideboard in 15 cards and sideboard out the combo. Or they go into like a Charbelcher strategy. So you bring in all this graveyard hate and you get mid-ranged out, or you bring in all this graveyard hate and then you get Charbelchered, which like doesn't mean anything. They just ramp into Charbelcher and all of a sudden your Fairy Macabre in your hand just means absolutely nothing. And so the problem with these archetypes tends to be that like it's really hard to interact with everything, and the decks trying to interact with each other really aren't. They're just trying to slow each other down to the point where they can just win. And that's what the red-based strategies are doing. Like they'll play the Blood Moon, but then they'll play the One Ring and draw into something, or the kind of the Eldrazi decks will just like ping out your stuff and just play these crazy massive good threats. Or the combo decks will just be able to just run away with the game. Heck, you even have Painter combo, which is like technically a red mid-range deck, but it just has an I win button in the combo through like Urza Saga. So in general, that's where Legacy is right now. It's really busted. It's hard to play fair things. And so that's where they kind of make these changes. So Troll of Khazad-dûm has been a big part of Legacy for almost 2 years now, with some form of Dimir Reanimator being the strongest deck in the format since approximately the release of Lord of the Rings. Troll of Khazad-dûm really is that differentiating piece, right? It's just that turn 2 reanimate, right? Like you can get a card into your graveyard really easily. You don't have to Thoughtseize yourself. You don't have to just kind of randomly entomb yourself. And it also like, it just gets you a land. Like, yes, it's technically the same thing as like entomb, but it just gets you a land. And it's not something like super busted either if your opponent like reanimates it. Yes, it's a powerful threat, but like it's not Atraxa. It's not, what's that damn demon called? Where is it? They ain't even playing it, right? Like they're just reanimating Archon or Cruelties. But regardless, it's not anything like that. It's a 6/7. You can interact with it. You can find other things to entomb, reanimate. The deck has so many ways to play. And then, it's extremely unique impact on deck building, allowing players to fill their graveyard with cards like Reanimate and Animate Dead without having to play a bunch of creatures that might otherwise be dead cards in their hand, or playing as many discard spells as possible. And especially before, when they banned like Psychic Frog was like crazy because it just like shored up the bad draws that you had where you drew all of your reanimation targets. Psychic Frog just like got stronger while putting them into your graveyard. So that was like a good ban way back when, but the deck still tends to be good. This subversion of opportunity cost has meant that Reanimator has been exceptional at playing a fair game while threatening an intensely unfair game for the better part of the last 2 years. We believe that Reanimator strategy is a core part of what makes Legacy feel good. A lot of people were talking about like Entomb ban, Reanimate ban, but I think the Troll ban is pretty good. For that reason, they banned Troll of Khazad-dûm, which should be interesting. On the other part of format speed, Eldrazi and other colorless strategies have been prevalent in Legacy since they got a boost from Modern Horizons 3 last summer. Generally speaking, these decks have presented the issue of completely sidestepping the rules of engagement in the format, making them extremely hard to interact with. Last December, we lost Vexing Bauble. Vexing Bauble was just a problem because it stopped the Force of Will decks. I think a lot of people just don't understand that, like, oh, you know, Magic free spells are a problem. Yes, free spells are a problem. We shouldn't have them in Legacy, Pioneer, Modern. But in a format where all cards in Magic's history are legal, the amount of broken things that exist in the format, to keep the status quo, you need free spells to tackle other more broken fee spells. And so that's what creates the line of a fair deck. You need Force of Will in a format like Legacy. You cannot apply your deck building restrictions and your metagame ideals of Modern into Legacy because the card pool is completely different. And if you believe that Legacy should just ban Force of Will, I don't think you know what you're talking about whatsoever. Like, I have some bad takes on this channel. I do it for, sometimes you got to do it for engagement, but Lord knows I'm not trying to ban Force of Will in Legacy. That's incorrect. Now, as insulation against cheap interaction spells for a fast combo, but now colorless strategies have positioned themselves pretty well. So Sowing Mycospawn does it all in the context of colorless Eldrazi. It can grab late game cards like Eye of Ugin and some interaction cards like Blast Zone and Karakas, but more frequently it gets copies of Wasteland to exacerbate the strength of land exiling effects. So let me outline this, right? So look at Sowing Mycospawn. The Sowing Mycospawn is 4 mana, and it says kicker for colorless and 1. So if you pay 6, when you cast this spell, without the kicker, when you cast it, search your library for a land card and put that onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So it comes in untapped. 4 mana, you get a 3/3 with Devoid, and you get a land kind of coming in untapped. If you kicker this card, when you cast this spell, if it was kicked, exile target land. The problem with this card is that both triggers are on cast. You can counter it all you want, it already did its purpose. Hell, like if you had a Cavern of Souls out, that's already the problem. In a format of soul lands, where you have Eldrazi Soul Land, you have Ancient Tomb, it's so easy to get this out, ramp out to something like this, and then all of a sudden you're paying 6, you have a 3/3 out, and how this stops the blue deck. So let me outline this to you. Not only are you unable to counter this because those two are triggers, imagine a world where the blue-based strategies usually play blue, of course, and some type of X. So whether it be blue-white, blue-green, it's usually blue-green-white, but then blue-black as well. Usually what you do is you splash that, right? Like you tend to not play basics of that color. Sometimes you will if you're playing like blue-white, but if you're playing 3 colors, you're generally not playing basics. You're playing blue basics to cast like Ponder's Brainstorms and stuff. You may cast like if you're casting like white-based removal, you may play a Plains, but regardless, the color that you splash into is non-basic. So what you do with Sowing Mycospawn is you kick it. And when you cast the spell, you grab a Wasteland. The Wasteland hits the non-basic. That's gone. The Sowing Mycospawn cast trigger then says if you kicked it, you exile target land, non-basic or not. So the 6 mana kicked Sowing Mycospawn already circumvents the Force of Will in your hand, already circumvents the days. Then on cast, it grabs a Wasteland that hits your non-basic and then exiles your basic. It essentially shuts you down completely, making blue-based control untenable. Like it is impossible. And now without blue-based control, you have the busted Oops All Spells deck running around in the format. And because of that, it speeds up to the format where people have to dedicate like half their sideboard like they are in Modern to be able to even beat a deck like that. And the only way that you do that is by then hyper enabling the blue-based Dimir Reanimator strategy, which just opts to be faster. That's a blue-based deck. But the problem is it's a control deck with an I win button. It's not really a control deck. It's not trying to Delver you out and play the slow game. It's just a control deck with an I win button. And so therein lies the problem. We're just playing a bunch of combo decks because blue is not viable in the format thanks to Eldrazi. And the decks that are trying to beat Eldrazi aren't playing blue. They're not playing the control decks. They have to play mid-range Prison. And mid-range Prison actually is not that bad in the format, but to be fair, it's also just abusing the One Ring. And so red Prison's at the top. Blue Dimir Reanimator actually isn't that bad because red Prison sideboard cards against blue Dimir Reanimator aren't that great. And so the format's in this mishmash of just brokenness. And so that's where we get the banning of Sowing Mycospawn. And I hope that kind of outlines that pretty well. Now, in the coming weeks, we'll be keeping an eye on the prevalence And win rates of various all-in combo decks and fast mana decks, such as Blood Moon Stompy and Oops All Spells, are prime examples of decks that have seen their meta share rise in the past few months with the density of modal double-face card lands and Modern Horizons 3. And honestly, it really just was that. Oops All Spells wasn't that consistent of a deck. The problem is, in Modern Horizons 3, we've got the introduction of 2 to 3 MDFCs that just can come in untapped. You can pay 3, you can bring them in untapped. And honestly, that's all this deck needed. That is, like, forget the blue-based decks and how playable they are. Having those consistent black untapped lands is genuinely all this deck needed. The rise and just the fact that you could get those down on turn 1 significantly skyrocketed the playability of those decks. And that's where you get these kind of coming up. Both currently within bounds of play rates and win rates, but have been historically acceptable. Ideally, the above changes will create space for more counterplay against the decks. And I believe so as well. Hopefully this will allow some of the blue decks to come back in and kind of tackle some of the Oops All Spells deck. Now the Blood Moon Stompy deck will likely still be good, but I think there will be a little bit of a back and forth in Legacy metagame. But ultimately, I highly recommend checking out someone like Thraben Yu or something like Bosch and Roll. Folks that also even the Eternal podcast and everything. Check out their content. They definitely will be having a much more nuanced and educated approach on this. I very much have a surface level interpretation of this ban and restricted announcement. But regardless, let's hop into the Pauper Bans. Oh my god. We're going to be spending the bulk of the end of this video on this. So, okay. So I already gave my little spiel at the beginning about the Pauper format. Let's go to the article itself. Let's just do that. Because they got their own article. I'm also going to be linking down below the Pauper Formats panel video on this. I think it'll probably highlight a lot of this, maybe add a bit more context. But regardless, explanation of Pauper Bans for March 31st, 2025. Hello, Pauper fans. This is Gavin Verhey from Woods of the Coast, PFP, blah, blah, blah. Fairly substantial round of changes. I went a little bit longer to observe, so they didn't make a change last time. So these are the changes. So the state of the format. Overall, the format is varied. There are a ton of decks you can play, but many of them have been hovering around 48 to 53% win rate. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this and I can shift this up to the main of the screen. The win rate gaps in the format are small. There's a ton of ability to play what you want and innovate. However, there's been more than just the numbers. While things can be quote unquote balanced, that doesn't mean that the play patterns feel that fun. Some of the packages are the same. To this, we looked at that Magic Online data, referencing some of the percentage below. Today's changes are meant to address issues and generally slow the format down slightly while addressing some play patterns. So first of all, Basking Broodscale. I think this one is pretty easy. Just the Sadistic Glee combo with Basking Broodscale, allowing it kind of its Pauper Splinter Twin combo. While a new deck shows up, we often want to give it time to just kind of adapt and watch where the format goes. Other times, a new deck will appear weak but gain strength over time and begin to converge on a build and add resiliency to it. Usually, it's worth waiting a little bit to see how things evolve. In the case of Glee combo decks, when it showed up in the release of Modern Horizons 3, it was far from its most powerful incarnation, but with time, the deck became tighter and more refined. The metagame had adapted around to it, with the deck boasting about a almost 54% win rate, which is good. But otherwise acceptable. However, its impact on the metagame remains huge. Everyone must be able to deal with the fast Glee combo, and cards like Snuff Out and discard spells have risen in value to make things a little bit more tenable. Additionally, it's not just fun to lose to. A lot of decks are invalidated because they're in trouble. Why Broodscale and Glee over Glee for the combo piece? Well, Glee has been a while for 27 years, which I'm happy they're addressing. Broodscale came in and broke that. Doesn't mean Glee is necessarily a busted card. So it just feels like maybe something can get printed to ban out Broodscale. Now, Deadly Dispute. This is the one I'm interested in. Broodscale may be the combo piece in a deck of much discussion, but there has been another card a little more subtly hanging over Pauper. Over the past year, we've seen a lot of decks converge on Deadly Dispute and Ichor Wellspring. So this is what I was saying, kind of 1 mana, draw 3. So Ichor Wellspring is 2 mana. It says when it enters the battlefield or is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card. So usually Deadly Dispute and Ichor Wellspring, you get a mana back. So functionally, it's 1 mana, draw 3. You're just getting like almost an Ancestral out of this. When it comes to card advantage and raw material in Pauper, this cavalcade of draw 2 cards is unmatched. Many top decks in the format, ranging from Infinity, Glee, Wildfire to Packdoll and Gardens, all play 4 copies of Dispute and 4 copies of Wellspring. It just, again, an 8-card auto slot in the backbone of black, as I was saying. Most other card draw options have been pushed out, and it's considerable reason to play black. And anytime you begin to look at the top 6+ decks within many different archetypes, they're all playing the same 8 cards. It causes a bit of concern. For example, this decision was made in the article mostly written just before Pauper Bans on a couple weekends ago, but the top 8 featured 7 decks with 4 Deadly Disputes. It can begin to homogenize the format, and it essentially became like a engine-based strategy, right? So Pauper is defined by a lot of engines. You can say Deadly Dispute is an engine. You could say the tapped artifact lands are an engine. This is just banning out a pillar of the format. We're looking at banning Dispute. We looked at banning Dispute, Acre Wellspring, and other draw 2 cards like Eviscerator's Insight and Acre Wellspring replacements like Mephitic Draught. So this one is like essentially Deadly Dispute with some downsides. It costs black and you lose a life and everything. But regardless, how were we going to break this up with many redundant pieces? Should we just live with it, ban a ton of cards? Well, we wanted to act on this, but also wanted community opinions. I asked about this a couple months ago in a recent video around the time the last ban and restricted announcement happened, and over the past few months, many Pauper fans and pundits have taken the side that yes, action should be taken. While there is substantial redundancy, after playing and analysis, it becomes clear that Deadly Dispute was just a huge cut above the others. While it certainly looks similar in structure, the treasure does everything from making the card cost functionally 1 mana to accelerating you to bigger threats, fixing your color. So again, if you didn't use the treasure, it would add to your mana the turn after. You could, play the Deadly Dispute on 2 for whatever reason. You would probably play Acre Wellspring on 2, Deadly Dispute on 3. On turn 4, you'd play a land, but you have 5 mana, which means you could play something like Avenging Hunter, for example, in the Gardens deck or something like that. You could play Avenging Hunter on turn 3. You could hold up like Removal plus Deadly Dispute, and again on 5 you play the Avenging Hunter. You're going over the top with your initiative. There's still a lot of redundancy, and we want to be clear that we don't expect to cut out the engine entirely. We would need to ban Wellspring and maybe drop to do that too. I would expect to see people playing Wellspring alongside Eviscerator's Insight, of course, with Flashback, and Reckoner's Bargain. Reckoner's Bargain is still a great tool in Affinity. It burns at the top. It's just a great piece to like sacrifice your Mirror Enforcers and then gain 7 life, and then you have something like Blood Fountain to like return that back anyway. So Affinity has a lot of recursion as well, and a lot of late game stay. So something like Reckoner's Bargain probably will stay in that deck. But losing Dispute is going to be meaningful enough to ding the Pauper format. Now, Kuldotha Rebirth, in the past, we talked about, format polarity and speed. Nothing is more apparent in terms that when it comes to mono red. Mono red serves a very important role in the format, keeping things honest, because it's not doing anything necessarily busted. It's just good. It's just playing good red cards. Remembering that, of course, Lightning Bolt is legal in the format. But by the same mark, it's always careful balance to make sure it isn't creating too much of the pressure and warping too much of the format around the ability to deal with it. It's also the most played deck on Magic Online leagues, which of course is, you have to understand that when it comes to like going Moto Infinite. So for example, if you go 3-2 in a 5-game league, you make 100 play points and you get like a treasure. So you get a little bit more, but you're able to go back into the leagues. It is the fastest to do that when it comes to just playing burn. So in general, you're going to be seeing fast combo decks and burn and just super aggressive strategies played a lot more online, because you can go through your leagues at your 5-0s and just get pricing a lot faster on average for your time used. So I'm not sure if like saying it's the most like played deck on Magic Online means too much. It's just that much easier to play. Also, the Broodscale combo just has a lot of clicking. I just feel like that would probably be the more well played one. But again, it's just something to consider. Looking at the deck now, we see very similar data to the time when we banned Monastery Swiftspear. While the deck is winning around 53% of matches totally within bounds, its game 1 win rate is outrageous. Oh, against Terror, Glee, Wildfire, and Red Green Ramp, it's both. Oh my, wow, that's a data point I did not know. Mono Red boasted a almost 65 to 70% game 1 win rate, and against other decks, it hovers at about 55 to 60. Wow. There is not a single deck among the most played decks that has a bad game 1 matchup against, game 1 matchup against. You have to dig down decks like Dredge and hey yo. And Dredge, it's because like life game is actually a part of its primary game plan. Like Elvish Well-Wisher single-handedly holding back burn, I guess. Before you start finding matchups, there's disadvantage in the first game. Now, after sideboarding, the story changes, and several decks, like it loses to Weathers the Storm and everything, which is pretty fair. There are like a lot of cards in sideboards that you just have to play to respect this. And a lot of them, like if you play out a bunch of cards and are ready to play out a bunch of cheap cards on your side, like Weather the Storm can really just get you there. This kind of polarity can be really damaging. If most decks have to sideboard a lot of cards for a single popular deck to beat it, it reduces how many slots you have for like the rest of the format. Ideally, red would be a little weaker, and people would, you know, kind of feel like they would need to sideboard a little bit less against it. So what happened here, part of it is how the format has evolved to where it is now, where people have to adapt to Glee to play Snuff Out, but Snuff Out costs a lot of life. We have good, like, build your own goblin guy with Goblin Tomb Raider, Reckless Lackey, which I was kind of saying for a while, like I didn't know why this wasn't seeing enough play, but now it does. Clockwork Percussion is just being insane because it's an artifact, so enabling stuff like Galvanic Blast even easier. But in any case, the deck is unacceptable position. We talked about several cards. We talked about Tomb Raider, the de facto Goblin Guide, as I mentioned, but ultimately they landed on Kuldotha Rebirth. You can deal with all the threats on board and then die easily to Rebirth alongside Bushwhacker. So again, as I was mentioning, this possibly pushes Bushwhacker out of the format. We'd love to see several more control decks enter the format. Between Bushwhacker and Rebirth, we'd rather hit one that gives a lot of value, like Experimental Synthesizer and Clockwork Percussionist. But hope is that this will bring red back to level, and it doesn't mean that red is unplayable, it just will have to adapt. Other decks and cards. While here, I want to give an overview of other decks in the format. Percentage-wise, nothing seems to be too out of line on match win rates. We see 54% win rate on the highest among any of the most played decks. It comes to an overall win rate. What we've hit today is largely for metagame and impact play pattern, but it's not totally clear how things are going to look once the dust settles. Now, okay, good. We did talk about the bridges again. We were close to removing them at points, but ultimately decided against it. As an Affinity player, this is kind of wild. I think that they should be banned. I genuinely think that they should be banned. For one, we want to see where the format stood in the wake of these pretty substantial changes. Second, we thought the ban of Deadly Dispute would be pretty notable ding to the power of Affinity and Artifact lands. We did a bunch of playtesting on the PFP and found that the ban of Deadly Dispute did significantly impact the deck. Okay, fair enough. While far from killing it, Affinity should be plenty playable. This is a notable loss for the Archetype, which I think so too. The treasure, again, still adding to the fact that you're still even on artifacts, by the way. In Affinity, you pay 2 for the Deadly Dispute, you sack the Wellspring, but you get a treasure back. You're still even on the amount of artifacts you have, which is pretty big. Depending on where Affinity ends up and how much of the format continues to see, using this mana base, changes of all of these lands may be necessary in the future. Okay. One other card we talked about, Writhing Chrysalis, which I don't think is fair. I think this card's really powerful, but it just feels like the first good mid-range threat in a really long time. Many people have called for the banning of this card, but I don't know. I think it's the first good mid-range threat in a while. Card's good. This card is an absolutely a rate outlier. There's a reason it's common that's absolutely worth the format in MH3 limited. Yes. It not being red, meaning, oh yeah, because it has Devoid. Yeah. Can't be Elemental Blasted. It's a strong card. Card has gotten a lot better and is in part due to Chrysalis, but it's great. So they're looking at decks like, however, over a long time, Pauper had a bit of a mid-range gap. So we either compress a deck, aggressive deck, and a very long time deck like Tron. So something like Tron, I think will, trial unbans, talking about like how these will work. High Tide is one, but I think they'll be able to take advantage of Prophetic Prisim. I think Tron is going to be the big one to take advantage of this. Affinity at a time was taking advantage of a card like that, but that's when Affinity was like 5 color, and the hate for Affinity was really different. If Affinity went back to playing like untapped artifact lands, it would just be a lot easier to deal with. It would be so much easier. You would have to unban something for Affinity, I think, to make it like actually playable, because it's so easy to deal with Affinity when you can attack its mana base and destroy it. Now you can't really do that because with the indestructible tapped artifact lands, its mana's fixed really well, but also you're able to destroy, which is a lot easier to do than exile. So I think like potentially in the future, if we see that ban, Prophetic Prisim could come back into the Affinity deck as like a draw engine, but also adds to your artifacts. And also fixes some of your colors as well. So this could be like a future-proof thing. High Tide I'm kind of interested with. This is a big one. So the problem is with High Tide. So this says a 1 blue instant. Until the end of turn, whenever a player taps an island for mana, that player adds an additional blue to their mana pool. So they like double up on stuff. And I just feel like the combo pieces aren't here. The big reason why this card was good is we had stuff like Peregrine Drake and Cloud of Fairies that like untap lands. The problem is like untapping lands to the point where like, yeah, they tap for 2 and you're essentially plus on mana. So for example, if you high tided, let's say you had 5 mana, you then tap 1 blue to high tide. Then the rest of your 4 mana adds 8, 2, 2, 2, 2. Then what you do is you Peregrine Drake for 5 of those, you untap your 5 lands. And then now you have 10 mana with the leftover of 3. And so that's where you can start to see that you're like up on mana. And then you add a flicker effect to that, you bounce your High Tide back, and then you just create like infinite mana really easily. And then you just put it into some type of sync, and then you go from there. The problem is all of those are kind of banned. So where do we take it from there? Second, there was some missing pieces. So, there's much of a history behind it. Want to try for a few reasons. For one, plenty of people wish spell-based combo decks could be more viable. While we think it's unhealthy if spell-based combo is the best thing you can do, it is a staple of Eternal formats. So again, the identity of Pauper really being an Eternal format. Modern is not. Pauper, Legacy, Vintage, Commander, those are our Eternal formats. It can also prey on decks that want to go super long. While Broodscale wasn't the right combo to leave legal, some combo can. The problem is that Cloud of Fairies, Peregrine Drake, and Frantic Search are banned, but Snap is still legal. So Snap, I think more popularly used in mono blue because you can return your counterspell fairy, but also you can untap like your ding lands, the depletion lands, where you add a counter onto them. So for like Poison Storm, you have like somewhere in the range of 0 to 2 copies of this card in Poison Storm. The format has sped up a lot. There are 8 various red blasts you can play and so on. And third, it's a fan favorite. It's formerly enabled a Legacy deck, and it's been somewhat memorable. We've held back on banning it for a while. I just don't think this does anything. Yeah, it's a cool unban. It's a fun trial unban. I just don't know what this is doing. So the next ban and restricted announcement is on June 30th, and we can expect to hear from us about High Tide's fate. If it breaks through and enables one of the more successful decks, sure, they might ban it then. I just don't know what this is enabling. I think there's probably I'm definitely going to be going to our Pauper, checking out the thread to see how people are breaking this. I just don't see it right now. I don't have that much experience with combo decks around High Tide, so there's definitely something I'm missing there. I just feel like a lot of the primary pieces are gone. I'm feeling more shaken up about the Deadly Dispute ban, I'm going to be honest. And Modern, just still seeing so many of the same things stay. I don't know. The ban and restricted announcement today was absolutely insane. A lot of changes throughout, big Legacy shakeups. I feel like not enough in Modern, and crazy to see the Pauper format just completely upended. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I'm definitely excited to hear the play design team's thoughts tomorrow and Gavin's thoughts tomorrow on all of this. Definitely will be making another video on that. So a lot of ban talk this week. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Are you excited for formats? Are you excited for certain formats where you see bans and unbans? Are you excited for the no changes in others? Sound off down below. And wow, crazy time to be playing some Magic Constructed.